Storytime on my psycho roommate from sophomore year. Sophomore year, I was doing random rooming. I set up a group chat with the girls of the room I was planning to move into, basically just an intro text and telling them that I have a cat, seeing if they had a problem with that. I immediately heard back from my now friend Liv telling me she also has a cat, so obviously she had no problem with it. The third roommate also had no problem with it. So the three of us continued to get to know each other for close to a month. And that's when we finally heard back from our fourth roommate. Let's call her Jenny. Jenny told us she was allergic to cats, so we had to move. She told us she was an international student, so she had priority over the room. Keep in mind, both of our cats are ESAs registered with the school, so they're covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So technically, we had priority over the room. We told her that we wanted to live together and it made more sense for one person to have to move rather than two or three. But she kept making up excuses of why she wouldn't move. On move-in day, we found out why. Her boyfriend lived in the dorm next door and she wanted to be able to keep an eye on him. And when I say next door, she definitely knew what she was doing when she picked this room, so we were able to see his front door through the peephole in our front door. One of the walls in our common room was connected to their common room, so we could hear anything that was going on there, and another one of the walls in the common room was connected to his bedroom. So a lot of nights, if she heard somebody coming down the hallway, she would look out the peephole to make sure that he wasn't bringing another girl home. And there were multiple occasions where she put an actual cup up to the wall to hear what was going on in their common room and in his bedroom. She would also go into our room so she could look out our windows, which would see into his room. They were extremely on and off, so it was hard to always know what was going on between them. But one time she told us that he broke up with her, telling her that she makes him want to unalive himself. But the next time her relationship came up in conversation, she pretended like that never happened and everything was completely fine. So in a word, I would definitely class their relationship as toxic. So first off, there were some people that were concerned when I didn't mention me or Liv's cats in part 2. Both of us still brought our cats to school and they lived with us. And once we got to school, she showed no signs of allergies. And I would know what the signs are, considering I'm actually allergic to cats. This next thing, I didn't actually experience it, but Liv did, and she told me about it. So I think I was in class one day, and Liv was just in the room, and she heard, screaming coming from Jenny's room. She could hear Jenny throwing things around her room, crying and yelling. Still to this day, we have absolutely no idea why. Another thing that was slightly concerning was, at one point, I learned that one of my friends knew her boyfriend, because they lived together during, a summer program. So he knew both Jenny's boyfriend and Jenny. I was talking to Jenny, and I was like, oh, my friend knows your boyfriend. She got so serious, looked me dead in the eye, and said, do not talk about me with people. Again, I have no idea why. It's also not the most, crazy story or anything like that, but it really just set me off. This is the toothpaste incident. So one day, I was walking to my car to go home, and I received a text. And when I say a text, I mean an essay. But so I received this essay of a text, accusing me of using her toothpaste without asking. In the text, she tells me that she puts her toothpaste in a specific way in her cup so that she can keep an eye on it and had noticed that it would move. And she says she knows it can't have been Gus because he can't reach it. Does she really think cats can't get on counters? She also said she had been keeping an eye on my toothpaste and noticed it hadn't been moving. Has she ever heard of putting something back where you picked it up from? She also had a thing about her bath mat where she didn't want it getting wet. I'm not really sure what she expected a bath mat to be for, but that was a thing too. And there are more stories after this, but this is when I realized I could not keep living with Jenny. And I talked to Liv about it, and she was on the same page. At this point, our fourth roommate had already moved out. So when we mutually made this decision, things started moving pretty quickly. I believe it was at this point when we contacted our RAs to express our concerns. We told them everything that was happening, including Jenny's toxic relationship, which they found pretty concerning. So the RAs contacted security to do a wellness check on her boyfriend. The problem is security did the wellness check while she was in his room, so obviously he would say nothing is wrong. But at this point, since we had contacted our RAs and security had gotten involved, we were pretty concerned for our own safety, especially considering we had to sleep in the same dorm as her. So for that night, we slept at a friend's place. And the rest of the time we lived with her, we were locking our doors to our individual rooms. And we started actively looking for a place to move, which proved kind of difficult considering there was 2 of us and we still wanted to live together, and at that point in the year, it was hard to find a room that had 2 openings. So it took a couple of weeks after me and Liv reached our breaking point for us to be able to find a room. Because we wanted to live together, it was really hard to find a room that still had 2 openings available, considering we were more than a month into the school year. We were working with housing to try to find a place to live. And one day we got a call that there was a room that had 2 spots available. They gave us the numbers for the girls that were living there, and we sent them a text to set up a meeting. In our initial text, we said we both had cats to make sure that they were okay with it straight off the bat. And they both seemed to have no problem with the cats. Jasmine wound up not being able to come to that initial meeting, but Julie did, and she was great. So we set up a date to move in. The timing of moving was extremely stressful because it was the week right before October break, so we had midterms on top of moving our entire lives into a new building. But the move wound up being absolutely amazing. And funny thing that happened after we moved is I got a text from Jenny, telling me that I stole her soap when we moved out. Like, I'll admit I did take a couple of her things as kind of a joke, but I didn't take her soap.
Hi guys. My name is Alex, and I'm 14. I want to tell you about a couple of events that completely changed my life. It all started a couple years ago, when my parents were getting a divorce, and my mom said that my father wouldn't have the right to see me after that. I have to say, I totally expected something like this to happen. My parents were fighting all the time. Actually, they'd been fighting for as long as I can remember. And for me, they would always play good cop, bad cop. Mom would scold me for something, then Dad would buy me ice cream and calm me down. But during their last fight, Mom said that she was going to take custody away from my father and even forbid him from seeing me at all. The worst thing is that she would have done it. Dad didn't have a steady job, and he wouldn't have had a place to live after the divorce, so the court definitely would have taken away his custody of me. The next day, my dad came to pick me up from school, and he said that we needed to talk. He told me that I had the right to choose who I wanted to live with, and then offered me the chance to go with him to another city and start a new life. Of course, I agreed. At that time, my mother was the evil one that wanted to take my father away from me. So we packed up all of our necessary things and were about to leave when I asked, shouldn't we tell Mom that we're leaving? But Dad assured me that he'd already talked to her, so that's how I said goodbye to my home. As we were driving on the highway, Dad told me what we were going to do. He said we would stay at a friend's house for a week until he found a job. And then we'd rent an apartment and find a school for me. And then we would deal with all the divorce and custody stuff. Sounded like a plan. Dad was energetic and wound up, and his enthusiasm rubbed off on me. I felt like we would be fine. So I closed my eyes and fell asleep, preparing for something new in my life. We arrived at the house of my father's friend after the sun had set, but unfortunately, he couldn't let us stay with him. He had a family, and obviously there would have been too many of us in the house. Eventually, I found out that my dad didn't even bother asking beforehand if his friend would be able to host us. It was late, and we were tired, so Dad decided that we would stay at a hotel. This didn't fit into our plan, because staying in a hotel is pretty expensive, and Dad had no job. For several days, my father went to interviews in search of work. Unfortunately, each time he returned sad. He kept getting turned down over and over again, and soon the moment came. Dad said we were running out of money, and we couldn't afford to stay in a hotel anymore. He tried to stay positive and convinced me that everything was going to be all right. But in reality, we had to live out of our car. It was terribly uncomfortable, but it was necessary in order for us to save money. Day after day, we were wandering around the city looking for work, and things kept getting worse and worse. And after one night, I completely lost my enthusiasm. We were running out of gas, and Dad came up with a plan. We drove into some kind of parking lot. Dad said he needed my help. He took a can and a hose and rigged up something to drain the gas from someone else's car, and I had to stand watch. After a few minutes, I heard a man yelling, "Hey, what are you doing over there?" Damn, I didn't notice him, and now he was running toward us. We started to run away, but he was catching up with us. Dad said that he'd hold him, and to meet later at the mall nearby. In fear, I just ran in a random direction, and a second later, I heard the sound of a falling canister. I was scared to even think about what was happening to my dad. 10 minutes later, I was sitting on a bench in the mall, out of breath. Soon, my father came. Oh my God, he looked terrible. His clothes were dirty, his jacket sleeve was torn, and his face had a huge bruise. It was awful. It turned out that the guy who was chasing us was a parking lot security guy, and he wanted to detain my father, but thankfully, he was able to escape. Okay, Dad was fine. But now all our stuff was in the car, and there was no way to get to it because the security guy had probably called the police. So we had no money, no food, no water, and no place to sleep. We walked through the empty streets, hungry and tired. Not to mention that I hadn't showered in 5 days. Soon I was just falling over my own feet, and Dad said we were going to spend the night in the park, and that tomorrow we'd figure something out. Dad woke me up and said an unexpected phrase. "Son, I have great news." Good news is exactly what I needed. Dad said he'd found out about a place where we could get free food. But I did not expect that this place was a dining hall for homeless people. We were given a bowl of soup and a couple of pieces of bread. But as soon as I tried it, my eyes filled with tears. I was at the end of my patience. I couldn't do it anymore. I started crying and asking Dad to take me home to Mom. And it looked like my dad was tired of it too. So he admitted that he couldn't make it, and that he'd figure out how to get us home. To cheer me up, Dad said he'd get us some normal food, and he left me waiting outside of a supermarket. I knew we didn't have any money, and I knew that my dad was going to steal food. So I started to worry when he didn't come out 10 minutes later. What if he was detained by security? But when the police car pulled up to the store, I knew for sure he was caught. I was scared, so I decided to just run away so they wouldn't catch me too. I just didn't know what to do. I wandered the streets until nighttime. I was scared, hungry, and terrified of everyone I met. People looked at me strangely. Of course, I was just a tear-stained child in dirty clothes who was walking alone in a big city. I had nowhere to go, so I decided to go to the first policeman I met and ask for help. And that's just what I did. They put me in a car and took me to the station. Officers and social workers asked me whether I was starving, whether my father had forced me to do anything, and other terrible questions. Then I was told that the police had been looking for me all day, and that my mom was on her way there. When she arrived, she ran to me in tears and hugged me tightly. As we drove home, she told me how worried and terrified she was. Mom said that the police had been looking for us from day one. Maybe for the first time in my life, I felt that my mother actually loved me. As it turned out, Dad didn't tell her that we were leaving. He only called her that morning after he had gotten arrested and said she needed to come because I was lost and alone in the big city. I was happy to go home, but I was really worried about my dad. Shoplifting is punishable by a fine, but for the fact that he had kidnapped me and we had to live in those conditions, he could not only lose his parental rights, but also go to prison. And that's what upset me the most. So, now it's been 2 years since then. My parents got divorced. Dad was lucky that he only received a suspended sentence for family kidnapping, if you can even call it luck. We talk pretty often by phone. Mom doesn't try to keep us from doing that. Apparently, after everything that happened, she realized how much I love my dad. And now she's trying to be the best mom for me. Dad promised he'd get his life back on track, get a job, and get his custody back. Who knows? Maybe then my parents' relationship will improve.
Am I the asshole for refusing to be my best friend's maid of honor after she told me my fiancé's not invited to the wedding? I've been dating my fiancé for 10 years and we're expecting a baby due in March. Best friend is getting married in a month and she's been with their fiancé for a year and they got engaged within 6 months. It's rushed in my opinion, but that's her decision. They got engaged around April and she asked me to be her maid of honor. She's planning on having a huge celebration with 200 plus guests. Naturally, I assume my fiancé would be invited. My best friend has known him for 10 years and they're friendly. Also, most of our friends are married, so their spouses get an automatic invite. During a chat, I brought up my husband's suit and she said, but I never told you he was invited. She said only married and long-term couples. Am I the asshole for refusing to be my best friend's maid of honor after she told me my fiancé is not invited to the wedding? I reminded her I'm engaged to that man, we're expecting a kid together, and I've been with him for 10 years. Also that we're planning to get eloped in a few months. She said she doesn't see our relationship as valid as it took us 10 years to make our relationship legal, and that our relationship is probably not that strong. I told her that's not her decision to make and that she doesn't get to decide whether my relationship is valid or not. She said we may break up so she doesn't want an ex in her photos. I told her she's being ridiculous with her bizarre beliefs and reminded her that I've been with my man for 10 years while she's been with hers for less than 1 year. I told her I'm dropping the maid of honor role because I refuse to be disrespected like that. Am I the asshole for telling my nurse if I wanted her opinion I would have asked for it? I, 26 female, am starting the uphill battle of trying to get my tubes tied. My PCP is on board with it, but let me know I'd have to go through Gyne since the procedure is done by them. She put in my referral and today one of the nurses called to set up my appointment. The nurse asked if I was trying to set up an appointment to change my IUD and asked if I was having problems. I said I was actually trying to set up an appointment to talk about getting my tubes tied. I could hear her disapproval over the phone. I could hear her disapproval and she said they don't like doing that procedure on people my age. She told me I'd be a wonderful mother and that I'm just scared of actually being pregnant. I got so annoyed and blurted out, I only need your help setting up an appointment, and if I wanted your opinion on my body in future, I'd ask for it.
I'm at Asselverdi, mad at my grandma for giving me an ultimatum. I've wanted to get my septum pierced for years. I got my nose pierced a few months ago and my grandma hates it. I told her yesterday that I was gonna go get my septum done. She said I would look like a ridiculous bull. I walked out of her house crying and ran into my dad's truck. She tried to keep apologizing and kept pestering me to forgive her. I was really upset and I was sobbing and I went into a full-blown panic attack. She would not leave me alone no matter what. I went to call my mom and my grandma called me a tattletale and a bitch. She also said when I get my new piercing, I am no longer welcome to visit her. My grandpa is dying, so by me getting it done, I wouldn't be able to see him again. I'm really pissed at my grandma, and I feel like this is my fault for being mad. So I really just want to know, am I truly the asshole in this situation? And I'd also want to know, would I be the asshole for getting it done because I really want it badly, even if that means I won't see my grandpa anymore? And guys, you guys can always submit stories to me on my Instagram DM. Thank you.